Good afternoon, Wellness Watchers. Thank you so much for tuning into your wellness on this lovely September afternoon. For those that have joined us before, welcome back. It's always a pleasure to have you here with us, whether you are live or watching the recorded version. And for those that have joined us the first time, welcome. It's always lovely to have new people tuning into their wellness, and you are absolutely welcome in the live space and recorded space. My name is Cassandra, and I am the founder as well as one of the psychotherapists at One Piece Therapy. And today we will be speaking on navigating transitions with confidence. So, understanding imposter syndrome, self esteem, and self worth. I'm sure this title is long, so there's a lot of different words that you are probably familiar with, but I wonder if any of you ever considered how they interact with each other. If not, or maybe if so, that is what we'll be diving into today. For those that are attending live, please feel free to use the chat function or unmute yourself when appropriate to engage with me. I love engagement. I love hearing your perspective. We do this for you. So we want to hear from you. I want to hear from you. So please engage with me. And of course, for those watching the recorded version, please feel free to use the comment section below and share your thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, and we'll be happy to address them. Okay. Before we tap into this webinar as well, I do want to acknowledge that One Piece Therapy is officially 5 years old. I am so excited. I'm so excited. Thank you for the celebration emojis. We're 5 years old. And with that, for those that have been following us for at least 1 year, you would know that every year on October 23rd, we give back to our community. So whether it's existing or new clientele, we give back by offering free virtual 30-minute sessions. So please do click the link, whether in our chat or in the link in our description box, to book your free session with one of our practitioners. And just checking in, you check in about how you're doing today, how you were doing yesterday, or even how you think you might be doing tomorrow. It's a simple check-in, and it can go as deep or as surface level as you want, but you will be speaking to qualifying practitioners or myself, who is a fully registered practitioner. So please do celebrate our 5th year with us. And also thank you for being with us. Okay, let's get into today. So there's a lot in the agenda. However, as I mentioned, engage with me throughout. Okay. It's important to know that the general goal of today's webinar is to explore the differences and connections between imposter syndrome, self-esteem, and self-worth. And I'll also be sharing some tools that you can help to navigate these changes with confidence. Right. And I hope everyone can leave today with at least one tool that helps them to feel empowered in times of transition. And we all know, whether you're in school or work, especially this year, actually, with work even more so, a lot of people are going back into office more, so it's less hybrid model. And a lot of people are returning to school, whether it's for the first time and they're starting kindergarten, even though I'm sure kindergarteners, they're not going to really pay attention to this content, but the parents of them, the guardians of them, that transition is big, and, the confidence might not be there, right? Or you're starting high school, or you're starting post-secondary, or maybe you're just starting a whole new career entirely. There's a lot of transitions that can challenge our confidence. So we're going to start with an introduction, predominantly about me and One Piece Therapy, and then defining imposter syndrome, and then talking about self-esteem and self-worth, and again, the differences and similarities as well. And then we'll get into life transitions. And then I will be providing some tools and techniques that can help with the confidence aspect. Okay. Also, we'll end in a mini practice to really bring in the whole experience of, we can talk about theory, we can have some tools, but what does it mean when we integrate all three, right? Or all the above. So very full webinar today. Let's get into it. So introduction, why does this topic matter? So as I mentioned, September is a season of transition, right? So we are exploring getting back to work, getting back to school, or going back to school, going back to work. We're also looking at milestones, right? Maybe you just graduated from post-secondary and now you're entering the world as a professional. Once that student title is stripped away, like it really is a whole new identity. And that can challenge how you feel about yourself when you've spent X amount of times in school, right? There's a lot of different identity shifts when it comes to transitions, especially things that we dedicate most of our awake conscious time to. And again, that's often work and school. So why not talk about how to get through this season than in this season? So more about myself. So who am I? As I mentioned, I am the founder and clinic director at One Piece Therapy, as well as one of the registered psychotherapists. So for me, it's a long story of how I came to be where I'm at, but I did start in physiotherapy. So I was a physiotherapist assistant. Before then, I was a dancer. I was all about physical health. And within my exploration of pursuing physical health as a career, I learned more about psychology. And psychology really, it opened my mind to the world. It opened my mind to myself. And I became very passionate of just understanding the brain, understanding interactions with others, understanding myself as well. And of course, other people. So with that, I've gained over 12 years of experience in the mental health field. I have my master's as well, and many different certifications and different approaches to supporting clients, including one that I like to use in sessions actively is my trauma-informed yoga practitioner certification. Because again, knowing about the physical health aspect is one thing, but how it integrates with the mind and bring it into session is really the holistic value that I've just experienced firsthand and I like to give to clients. So that's a bit of who I am. Who do I support? I support individuals, typically ages 16 and older, couples and groups. And I support predominantly the BIPOC community. That is who I specialize in, but I also support various identities and sexualities as well. I think it's also important to acknowledge the concerns that I specialize with. One of them is life transitions, which we'll be talking about indirectly and directly today, as well as self-esteem, self-worth, identity, emotion regulation, anxiety, depression, stress, trauma, intergenerational trauma, and many others. But these are my core that I'm at least recollecting in this moment. And please check out our website to discover more about the concerns that I can support you with. Who are we? So who is One Piece Therapy? Yeah, with my background about physical health and mental health, I love how the mind and body work together, but also how they work separately. And therefore, at One Piece Therapy, we are a holistic wellness practice that specializes in BIPOC support. Currently, we offer nutrition and psychotherapy, of course. There are, I believe, 9, including me, psychotherapists, and including social workers on our team. And we have one lovely nutritionist named Sean. I definitely suggest checking out our previous videos because all of our team has something on our channel, including our nutritionist who has a lot of knowledge about food and how to take care of yourself based on the different concerns you experience. So who do we support as a whole? As mentioned, these are our services. In general, we support clients ages 10 and older, whether it's individual or in a family as well. And we support groups and couples both virtually and online. We also have various different approaches that we use with supporting clients and various concerns, such as like neurodivergence and ADHD, grief and loss, sex concerns, many different, like they're very random what I just listed. So please do check out our website, as we have a lot of services to offer you and make sure that you feel holistically taken care of on your wellness journey. So defining imposter syndrome, yes, you are where you are supposed to be. Just to give you a little snippet of it, it's one of these concepts that can make you feel like you are not where you're supposed to be. Whether it is here attending our webinar or going to school or going to work, you are where you are supposed to be, or otherwise you wouldn't be there. I think that's just fair to say. So I do invite everyone to either reflect or journal on this reflective question. So when you hear the words imposter syndrome, self-esteem, or self-worth, what comes up for you personally? Feel free to think, or if you want to share, I would love to hear your thoughts. Yes. Yes. So imposter syndrome is feeling like you don't belong. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because it's imposter, right? It's you feel like you're undercover and in some way you're lying, or someone says like you're a fraud. Um, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And yes, with self-esteem, it's about confidence, right? Yeah, it's about feeling empowered. Yes. Okay, so with imposter syndrome, someone mentioned that you can also feel guilty about where you are. Interesting. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. Thank you. These are a lot of great responses and quite accurate as well. Quite accurate. Okay, let's get into it. So what does imposter syndrome mean? It is the persistent belief that your success is undeserved and that you're faking it, or that it's only a matter of time before others find you out, right? So as someone said, you can feel like a fraud, right? Or that you don't belong. Like all these synonyms is representative of this syndrome. And it often appears during times of transition. So whether it's starting a new job, returning to school, stepping into parenthood, reaching a personal milestone, shifting identities from student to professional, even when you have clear evidence of your skills and accomplishments, imposter syndrome can make you feel like you're on shaky ground. So it's very important to acknowledge that this happens during times of transitions, and not necessarily that it happens because it is in fact the truth, right? It's more of a sign, an indicator that things have shifted for you. So common signs are, there's fear of being found out, um, often attributing your success to luck, right? Like, oh yeah, I just got here because I just happened to apply for the job on Indeed. Even though you see that so did 100 plus people apply, which is also part of the sign, is minimizing your accomplishments. Like, yeah, I just got into my master's program, but I mean, I just submitted everything that I was told to submit, right? You can follow the rules and still not be qualified. And I'm sure we've also experienced a level of that in our world, where you can really apply your best, and sometimes things don't happen as you expected to. So for the fact that it did and you accomplished something, that is indeed a fact, right? And this often appears during transitions because it's new, right? So it feels like there is higher expectations and it's unknown territory. So when it comes to, for example, new environments, we're not familiar with what to do, right? You know, what is the culture? Who are we going to show up as? So as much as we have our core self, we're also very dynamic, right? Certain environments, certain relationships can bring out certain parts of us than other places or people, right? So when it's new, it's like, okay, where is the ground, right? What is the routine? We are creatures of habit. So understanding self in new spaces is very crucial for our confidence or ultimately for our self-esteem, right? And with that, there can also be higher expectations, whether it's a new role at work or a new grade or even a new education institution overall. Typically it's more expectations than the year prior, right, or the position prior. So it's triggering because it's like, oh well, I'm coming from frontline and now I'm in um the office. Now I'm in corporate, completely different environments, right? And therefore expectations change too. And unknown, it's a transition, right? That means it's new as well. So we don't like the unknown. I think that's fair. We like to be predictable. We like things to be predictable. Probably we don't like to be predictable of our own selves. I find like a lot of people like mystery. Ultimately, we need clarity, right? We need certainty. We need security. So when it's unknown, it challenges us in how do we navigate this space that you don't have much of an idea about. See, I'm sure you can imagine, even as I'm saying these things, a lot of emotions can come up, and therefore beliefs tend to be associated with certain emotions like fear. So it's so important. I just want to normalize that you are not alone. This is an incredibly common human experience, right? And again, it's more of an indicator that you are experiencing a transition rather than as an indicator that this is your identity and you actually don't belong and you are a fraud, right? Um, I have a question more to reflect on, or feel free to engage with me now. Um, how many of you have ever felt like you weren't good enough, despite evidence to the contrary? It's a deep question. You don't have to answer it. As I mentioned, feel free to reflect on it. Okay. If you do want to answer it as I'm speaking, go ahead though, but we will be continuing. But yes, please do think about it. Okay, someone mentioned to say it again. So how many of you have ever felt like you weren't good enough despite evidence to the contrary? Right, so just thinking about times where this feeling of like, I don't belong, I'm not good enough, I don't know what I'm doing. Um, have you ever felt that way? How many times have you felt that way? And how and each time you're thinking of those times you felt that way, if you have ever, what is evidence on the contrary? Right? Okay. So let's get into self-esteem and self-worth. So how do you see and understand yourself? Which is another self-reflective question in itself. So with self-esteem, what this means is based on how we evaluate ourselves, right? So whether it is skills, performance, external factors such as comparing yourself to others, self-esteem is very performance-based and can fluctuate based on successes and setbacks. Okay. In terms of self-worth, this is more of the inherent value that we have for simply being who we are, right? This unconditional core value of this is who you feel you are. This is your worth. Um, this is your value, right? To others, to the world at large. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes, because I know often they are used simultaneously, right? They're used as synonyms, but there are different, even though they are related, they can be related. It's very different, right? Because you can also have a high self-worth, but a low self-esteem, right? Or a high self-esteem, but a low self-worth. And it's like, how do you have the typically, if your self-esteem is high, you tend to have a high self-worth. However, it's not necessarily guaranteed either. So it's important to identify who you are. That's a big question. It's important to identify how you understand and see and perceive yourself, right? How you evaluate yourself and what is that inherent value about self. So the relationship, low self-esteem can fuel imposter syndrome, but shaky self-worth keeps the cycle alive, right? So here's the catch. Imposter syndrome thrives when self-esteem dips, but it becomes even more powerful when our self-worth feels fragile. Recognizing this distinction is key to breaking the cycle of self-doubt, right? Does that make sense? Because of course, if you don't feel, if your self-esteem is low, then it kind of embraces imposter syndrome, right? But when your self-worth is low, it feeds imposter syndrome. Like now it just becomes a belief rather than a feeling, right? Instead of feeling like I don't think I belong here, it's like, oh yeah, I don't believe I belong here, right? So some examples would be, someone is praised at work. It may boost your self-esteem, but if your self-worth is low, you would still feel like a fraud, right? And I think that goes with anything. Someone can compliment me, someone can compliment you even on your looks, right? And if someone's saying, oh, you're so beautiful, you're so handsome, I love your hair, I love your style. If you are not feeling like, oh, I love my hair or I love my clothes today, then it would cause this imposter syndrome to come along, right? Because that self-esteem and that self-worth isn't there isn't that pillar to make you feel grounded in understanding yourself. Another example is a high achiever, right? A high achiever with success, let's say in school, but so you're getting all the grades, right? But you have a low self-worth and you could still feel like a fraud, right? I know in particular, I'm thinking of law school, right? You can, first of all, getting into law school is already a level of a high achievement and success. And you can get the grades. I know how they grade it tends to be, I forgot what it's called in this moment, but you're graded based on your class, right? And that median. Um, so you could still be doing great in comparison to all your class members, right? But a low self-worth would be like, well, I'm still unsure about who I am as a lawyer, right? I'm still not confident in that I am at the top of my class, right? Because their self-worth is still feeling like I am a fraud here. I just happen to know how to study and answer all these questions with the exact detail that was expected of me, right? Again, the minimizing, right? The dismissing of achievements. Um, can happen with imposter syndrome. So another reflective question is, where in your life do you notice your self-esteem fluctuating? And where do you notice it struggles with self-worth? right? We also have another webinar that talks more about self-esteem and self-worth directly. And I think it's important to mention here that it is on a spectrum, right? So it, as I stated in the question, it fluctuates, right? It can change. Sometimes, let's say if you're in school, right, and your self-esteem is a bit low when you're in class, right? Maybe you don't feel as confident speaking up or answering a question, but perhaps when you're doing the exam, right? You're in your own world, in your own mind. There's no expectations to talk out loud. Your self-esteem is higher, right? So it fluctuates. And I think that's important to say is that as much as we can teeter more to the low side in this context, in different ways, you can experience both low, high, mid self-esteem in different areas of your life, right? And I think that's also important when it comes to talking about building confidence, is that there is not a complete low uh, perception of self in every environment, but possibly just in this new transition. However, with self-worth, there, if that is low, that tends to be more of what you carry in each environment, regardless, right? That tends to not fluctuate per se if that belief has already been solidified, right? That doesn't mean it stays forever, though. I think that's important. It doesn't stay forever, but it's less of a scale and more of a state of belief. So now talking about this in life transitions, even though we've been talking, bit by bit, about what this looks like in life transitions, I think it's good to keep in mind, are you prepared? Are you prepared for the life transition, right? How have you worked on your self-esteem? How have you worked on your self-worth to start this life transition with the most resilient, optimistic outlook as possible? Let's get into it. Okay, so why and how transitions trigger self-doubt. So we did talk a bit more about the interaction, but just to break it down more specifically. So some simple math, right? So new roles means new responsibilities and expectations, right? Even if you signed up for, you already saw in the contract what your new expectations are going to be, you probably even were more than likely applied based on what you saw the new responsibilities and expectations are going to be. However, it can still be triggering, right? Because at the end of the day, it's still new, and knowing something is different than practicing something. Right? Also, there's loss of familiarity, which can also lead to a loss of confidence. Again, being creatures of habits, we tend to want to do what we're already familiar with and just keep that going. And that's in literally every sense of the word. Sometimes even in relationships, when we're already familiar with someone and their strengths, their flaws, you'll keep going. You'll just keep going with it, right? Because there's that familiarity. And I often do challenge clients to thinking or reframing it. Well, first thinking about it in a way where it's like, are you really familiar or are you comfortable? Right? Or, okay, edit that part out. So I often ask clients to think about the word familiarity and really challenge it in terms of when we talk about comfort, right? Often we can say, I'm comfortable doing this, I'm comfortable doing this. Like, are you comfortable or are you familiar with doing it, right? Because there's a difference, there's a huge difference. I'm not going to get too much into it, but I think that's a beautiful question to reflect on when it comes to transitions, because if you're not comfortable, that probably enabled the transition, right? Even though there can be a loss of confidence because of the transition, It's also more of a loss of familiarity. Right? So they go hand in hand. The third point is the unknown territory. And again, that leads to uncertainty, right? We want to know what we're doing and how we're doing it at all times. There's a level of control, there's a level of security, there's a level of confidence that all play with each other. And of course, in every environment we're in, whether it's school or work, we want to show up as our best self, right? And part of that is knowing exactly what the expectation is. However, that is hard when it's unknown territory. There's also, this equation of excitement plus anxiety is change, right? So I think this part is really knowing. Well, this part is really knowing that excitement and anxiety can coexist, right? Often we feel we want to name it anxiety, which creates more fear, which creates more stress, and just a lot of other symptoms in this transition when you're already experiencing concerns about your confidence, right? And believing that you are an imposter, right? Experiencing self-doubt. Like all these things can come from when we're only one-sided on our experience, but acknowledging the excitement that is there as well. It can help with the change of navigating a new transition. Lastly, growth feels uncomfortable, right? So when things are changing, we don't like it. And I get this really goes back to being creatures of habits. We like things to be predictable, so we feel more control, more certainty, more all these things that we do to make sure we're showing up as our best self. And it's uncomfortable when we're entering into a new territory, right? But these are important to just identify because they're triggers rather than things that we have to hold on to and believe because we are experiencing it, right? So, for example, loss of familiarity and experiencing a loss of confidence does not mean you are now incompetent, right? Or incapable or an imposter. It simply means you've lost some familiarity or total familiarity, and there's a level of confidence that will also be disrupted in that, right? And therefore, building back the confidence will help in the transition and not solidifying, well, this is now who I am. Right? And in general, some common feelings that can happen, as mentioned in this list as well, is uncertainty, excitement, anxiety, fear, overwhelm, confusion, loss, right? Yeah, someone just mentioned I feel these things too. Yeah, it's overwhelming, right? It can be overwhelming, and when things are overwhelming, we tend to become more negative, right? And that's just our brain overworking. Whenever something brain wise or physical wise, like behavior wise, when it's overworking, it tends to be negatively associated. So that's also really important to be mindful of is how much are you really building up your experience to go against you, right? Then finding that ground and, okay, you're not an imposter. This feeling is a sign that you're going through a transition. How do you tap into your self-worth, right? Because you might feel like an imposter, but your self-worth is still quite high. Tap into that to remind yourself, okay, I'm here, right? We'll get more into the tools shortly, but it's flowing. Or self-esteem, right? Maybe finding a task that you are good at. So if it's again the classroom, maybe speaking for the first couple of weeks or first few weeks doesn't feel comfortable, but when exam time comes, that's your zone, right? Or in a role, depending on the role, okay, maybe doing this part is completely new from your previous role. So it will take some training, some orientation around it. But other roles other responsibilities in that role might feel very familiar to just practice your self-esteem in that realm, right? So just a gentle reframing here. The transitions don't mean you're failing. They just mean you're growing. Again, when we transition, it tends to be to a higher level, right? In any context. So remind yourself you are growing, which is directly opposite of an imposter. Well, not even directly opposite, but they don't work with each other. Okay. Okay, so tools and techniques. So again, let's use confidence as our North Star. So there are four tools and techniques I like to give. I've given out a few as we've carried on, but the four I like to specifically talk about today is name the voice, gather evidence, anchor in self-worth, and self-compassion pause. So as you can imagine by the names I've addressed so far, I've already, expanded on this in our previous slides, but let's get more into it. Okay, so name the voice, right? So this is identifying the imposter thoughts as the critic, right? Or whichever name you find appropriate. It could be an alter ego name. It could be an arch nemesis name. Um, or the doubt voice is another one I've listed here. Whatever makes it distinct for you to know, okay, this is your imposter thoughts, right? The one that is saying you don't belong here, you don't know what you're doing, you're not good enough. Name that voice and create distance from it, right? This is how we externalize what is yours and what is not yours, right? How we externalize the imposter from your self-esteem and or your self-worth, right? And an example of it in practice is saying, that's just my critic speaking, right? And that could be mentally or verbally. I suggest verbally saying it because again, that externalizes it more. But it's important to identify the name. Identify the name, identify the critic so that when it appears, it doesn't feel like, okay, now you have to believe that thought, but just acknowledge it as a thought because of the transition you're experiencing, right? And just say, oh, that's just my critic speaking, right? Like, okay, that's just my critic speaking. I know that once I study for this exam, I'm good, right? That's just my critic speaking. I know for the fact that I got hired, they must want me here, right? The other tool is evidence gathering. So this is writing down concrete evidence of your skills, achievements, and growth. Okay. And of course, the growth is depending on the context you choose, right? And the timeline. It could be current, past, right? Celebrate the facts, not just the feelings, right? Again, because sometimes our feelings can feel like beliefs for the simple fact that they exist, right? Like some people might feel when they experience anger that they are an angry person, and that's completely different, right? So for the fact that you might think, oh, I don't belong, and there's feelings of maybe sadness or isolation, that doesn't mean it's a fact, right? The fact is that you are in the same department as some people that you look up to, right? It doesn't mean you don't belong. It just means you have feelings when you're first experiencing that environment. So again, another example here is that you can verbalize the compliments, right? Verbalize past wins and skills developed. Ultimately, it's important to externalize this experience, whether it is writing down or verbally saying something to yourself. And yes, this does include like self-affirmations as well. So anchor in self-worth. So as I mentioned, daily affirmations, right? Affirm one way you are valuable beyond achievements. So maybe saying, you just got this new promotion. Now you're a manager, maybe even a director, right? Instead of it being solely about your work environment, say, you know, regardless of work, I know I am a great cook, right? Um, Regardless of how I feel today, I know I love my outfit, right? Whatever works for you. And the example I wrote here is I am valuable beyond my achievements. So just simply making it very general. That could work, but also I think specifics do help depending on how loud the critical voice is. Okay, but anchoring in self-worth is just reminding yourself again that you are worth more than the position, right? The imposter syndrome can create a lot of doubt. Doubt can challenge how you view yourself, but once you give space to reminding yourself of who you are and really anchoring in that helps to automatically, naturally build back the confidence, right? Instead of the doubt coming and now spiraling in that, right? Again, thinking about the excitement and anxiety and how they can go together, and not just anxiety that becomes explosive. And lastly, I wanted to mention, at least for the tools and techniques directly, is a self compassion pause. So, in moments of self doubt, ask, what would you say to a close friend who felt this way or is experiencing the same thing? Shifting that critic, right? Shifting from judgment to kindness. And sometimes a short breathing exercise could help in that change too, right? If it's hard to maybe think outside of yourself, I like to recommend breathing exercise such as 6, 7, 8. We also do have we do have a video on different mindfulness breathing exercises on our channel, so please feel free to check that out. I'll post it in the description box below here as well for the recorded version. With 6, 7, 8. So ultimately, it's where you inhale through your nose for 6 counts, you hold your breath for 7 counts, and then release slowly through your mouth for 8 counts. Right? Or the 4 square breathing, which is also very popular. It's where you inhale for 4, hold for 4, release for 4, then you pause and repeat. So whichever helps you to shift within self, whether again it's taking a moment to breathe and make that transition mentally, or asking the question, it might automatically be like, oh yeah, I would tell my best friend to not worry. Obviously, easier said than done. But again, take your own advice, right? If you would tell someone, you do belong here, like they hired you and over 100 people applied, or you do belong here, like they accepted your application in a program where a lot of people also applied. The facts are the facts, right? So just reminding yourself and being compassionate that you are where you are supposed to be. And even though this is a new experience, that doesn't mean you don't belong, right? Or that you are a fraud. Okay? Any questions about any of these tools or techniques? So someone asks if they should do one or all. And honestly, that applies to you, right? That depends on you. Sorry, that depends on you. If one of these works for you and that's, your bread and butter, please feel free to use it until your heart's content. I suggest, having two tools, because you never know. Some contexts will be better situated for one tool versus the other, right? The same way we can't use a screwdriver for all bolts and screws, right? We need different things to really create that efficiency in the work, right? So I suggest taking away at least two, if not from the four offered in general, what was shared today. Or if you need more than what was mentioned, feel free to reach out to us. We are accepting new clients at One Piece Therapy. So we're more than happy to talk with you about how to continue to build your confidence, how to step away from this imposter syndrome belief, right? And really embracing your transition that I'm sure you've worked hard to get to, right? Or in general, maybe you're not doing anything new, but there's still this imposter feeling or this low self-esteem, low self-worth. Um, More tools help because different contexts calls for different things. So please feel free to reach out to our admin. I will give the contact details at the end of this webinar so you can, or again, watching the recorded version, it is in the description box below. But yes, please do reach out if you need more than what was shared too. Okay, so let's get into the mini practice. So you are who you think you are. I think that's important to say. Whether you think negatively of yourself, right, that can quite easily become a belief, or you're thinking positively of yourself, that can also become a belief. So you are who you think you are, which ultimately means as well as if you think differently, you'll perceive yourself differently, right? So let's practice what this actually looks like. So this is a short grounding exercise that I want to invite you all to participate with me in. So just finding this comfortable or just finding a comfortable position, um, and we can begin. So close your eyes, or if you prefer your eyes to be open, just have them gazed on a blank space, whether that is the ceiling, the wall, or the floor. It's your choice. And once you've made that choice, take 3 deep breaths. Really engage your belly as you're breathing in and as you're breathing out. Recall a time when you felt self-doubt during a transition. And when you're ready, notice how you feel in your body during this recollection. And when you're ready, imagine offering yourself some kindness instead of criticism, whether that is in a statement, right, or a few sentences or behavior. Now open your eyes if they were closed and notice what shifted bodily, thought wise, and feeling wise. Again, feel free to reflect on this in your own time. And if you want to share now, you're more than welcome. I also think those that did participate as well. Mm, okay. I'm not sure if anyone plans to share, but again, no pressure. I do want to really drive home the purpose of this meditation is to really highlight the power of self awareness and self compassion, and how that can really transform your experience of navigating imposter syndrome, navigating change. Yeah, okay. So someone mentioned it felt better to acknowledge that you can change the situation by just changing your thoughts. Yeah, absolutely. The mind is powerful, which is why I fell in love with psychology. I fell in love with um, mental health because, once we're able to control how we perceive something or ourselves, it really can change everything. Everything. It's a domino effect. So I'm glad you're feeling better, and I hope more of you are also feeling better with um, reimagining past scenarios and knowing that they can still apply to the future and present scenarios. Hey, any questions? Okay, so as you're asking, preparing the questions, I do want to say, um, in summary, that self doubt doesn't mean you're incapable. It just means you are human and you are growing. Okay. So thank you all, every last one of you, for attending this webinar and participating with me. Um, it's so crucial to acknowledge that while today's insights and tools are helpful, lasting change often requires deeper exploration and guidance. So, as I mentioned, if the tools given were not enough, or maybe they were, but you just want to tap more into your experience in your transition, please feel free to reach out to us at One Piece Therapy. I provided our website and our phone number here. Um, I'll also provide the link for you to book the check-in day, right? So please don't forget, we have our check-in day October 23rd from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Okay, so all day, completely free, completely virtual, and it's 30 minutes to check in with yourself. Okay. Therapy ultimately is a beautiful, safe space that is collaboratively created, right? So it does help to explore the roots of imposter syndrome and self-worth struggles, as well as to develop personalized strategies to build resilience and to sustain or a sustainable self-worth, and ultimately rebuilding confidence and your authentic identity and healing old narratives, right? So please, if today resonated with you, I invite you to book a session or just contact us or subscribe so you stay up to date on your wellness. We're more than happy to continue this journey with you. And thank you all again for your time. Take good care. Have a beautiful rest of your day.